What's happening, people? Welcome back. Anyone with a light understanding of physics or chemistry knows that maintaining any state other than equilibrium requires continual energy and effort, but we've all heard people with and without an understanding say that they just want to be happy or that happiness is something that they're working toward in life. This is a ridiculous thing to pursue, as I'm about to describe, because seeking happiness is really no different than seeking a full stomach. They're both temporary states of existence. They're both fleeting experiences of being happy or being full, not an experience or a state that can be possessed permanently and absolutely. So you can no more possess a positive and desirable state permanently and absolutely, in my opinion, then you can avoid a negative one. To get what I'm saying, I think it helps to remember that we're analog beings. If this isn't true fundamentally, it is true at the level of biology and human existence. Analog harmonic waves are a great way of conceiving of the experiences we have. And because every human experience is the resulting effect of an analog harmonic wave, and that every one of these waves has a bidirectional amplitude, it means that we cannot cut off any portion of the wave without destroying the wave or minimizing and shrinking the wave. So really, if we wanted to get rid of one half of the wave, we would destroy the wave and potentially destroy the possibility for human experience altogether. We don't want to experience the lower portion of the wave, of course. We only want to experience the upper portion, but denying the wave in its entirety, denying the lower portion, is about as congruent with the logic of human existence in the universe as denying the fact and reality or the existence of the sensation of cold or the phenomena of death. It's irrational. Now, pursuing the positives, the pleasurable, the joyous things in life is sensible, but to do it to the exclusion of the negatives is not sensible because they're both really just opposing amplitudes of the same experiential wave, a wave that we should try to ride the center of as long and as frequently as possible. To understand why life's negatives, why the negative portion of the wave is inescapable, take a look at this waveform here. Envision the upper part of the wave being happiness and the lower part being sadness, or the upper part being pleasure and the lower part being pain. The upper and lower limits of the wave represent the upper and lower limits of these feelings, and the wavelength represents the intensity of these feelings. The higher the wave, the higher the joy, ecstasy, or bliss you're capable of experiencing, and by necessity, the deeper the pain, sadness, and suffering. This wide range of potential experience, including the undesirable, is actually something that we should be grateful for, in my opinion, because the wave can't be restricted in one direction without limiting its range in the opposite. Doing so does minimize the trough of the wave, but it does the same to the crest, the portion where ecstasy, joy, and bliss reside, a fact that isn't well understood by people looking to escape and numb themselves. Even if you restrict your waveform and narrow the amplitude, you don't eliminate your ability to feel the downside of the wave. It's just that with a shallower floor and a lower roof, we'll spend most of our time around the lower levels of the newly narrowed harmonic. It'll take more energy to move us from level 1 to level 2 if we only have 3 levels in our shortened waveform, when the same amount of energy would move us 3 or 4 levels in a 10-level natural waveform. Think of the gearing on a transmission, if that helps. A car with only 3 speeds, a vehicle with only 3 gears, can still reach 100 miles an hour, just like a vehicle with 10 speeds or 10 gears. It'll just take the 3-speed or 3-geared vehicle a lot longer to get there, and it'll be a lot less interesting, a lot less fun along the way, a lot less dynamic and enjoyable. This is why we feel more stable when we've limited our capacity to feel. We've turned what was once a varying range of potential experience into a pretty much uniform expanse. Even if the intensity of our feeling changes, if the energy level changes in our waveform, we may not notice because there will be nothing to contrast or compare or to distinguish one energy level from another. Limiting feeling limits life necessarily. And if we constrain ourselves severely, we can actually border on being dead. We can actually die before we die, and not the good kind of death, not the kind of death that destroys ego and limitation, but the kind of death that destroys life, because the only things in life that don't feel are non-living things. We should remember that and probably look at the universe and flow with it and see that when the universe is left alone, it tends to expand. So allowing our capacity to feel to expand would be a sensible thing in this situation. Think of sound waves here. Think of music. No one wants to hear an album that consists of just 2 to 3 different tones. Yes, we can hear it. It can be experienced just like Mozart and Beethoven can be experienced audibly. However, the album of 2 to 3 tones is boring. It is not rich enough to be a desirable or even a pleasurable thing. It could actually be painful if it goes on long enough. And what we really want, but we aren't aware of directly sometimes, is complexity, richness, dynamism. We want multiple tones, different pitches, different volumes, at different intervals with different textures on them. This is what we truly desire, and we need to remind ourselves of this natural desire for complexity and richness whenever we want to constrain or constrict or limit our capacity to feel. In truth, the album of just 2 to 3 tones may not even be experienced or heard audibly after a period of time, because our brains are likely to cease dedicating the requisite energy necessary for conscious attention and awareness, because the 2 to 3 tones are not interesting, desirable, or pleasurable enough to warrant that energy and effort. And when we cease seeing something as warranting of that effort, we cease dedicating energy toward it. And if this happens broadly and generally enough in life, then we'll cease dedicating energy toward life in a broad and general fashion. We need to remember that we as human beings have an incredible ability to acclimate and normalize new experiences. So when we narrow our experience, our capacity to feel, our waveform, we have not done anything to the center. We've just created a new center from which every deviation from center will over time slowly be experienced as being just as extreme and intense and painful as the former reality, the formerly expansive reality in existence. Now, this is the inverse, but think of growing up in a small town in Wyoming, in Iowa, in Idaho, where the tallest structure for hundreds of miles is the church spire, the church steeple of 100 feet. You've never seen anything taller. It's the tallest thing you can even imagine. It's the tallest thing you've ever experienced. Then you move at the age of 5 or 6 to the island of Manhattan with all of its skyscrapers, and now your conception, your notion of tall still exists. It's just the standard for something to meet that has now been shifted higher and higher. Now no longer is 100 feet tall. Now something must be 500 feet or 1,000 feet before it breaches into the definition of tall that you now hold in your new reality. We can't escape negative feelings, although it makes sense why we would want to. And this desire to escape negative feelings is, I think, partially to blame or partially explaining why we inhabit the world we live in today, a world where everyone claims to be trying to make things better and to make the world better and themselves better. But all we've really succeeded in doing is making the world softer and making ourselves softer, because we're immature in this way. We don't want to deal with things that make us afraid and hurt our feelings and make us uncomfortable and upset and challenge our tightly held notions of reality, of self, and of world. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to deal with anything we don't find pleasurable or desirable or enjoyable. And that is juvenile. And if we don't check that inclination, that desire, I think we'll ultimately end up destroying everything that's right in an attempt to not have to address or deal with everything that's wrong. I think the more enlightened, the more intelligent and adult perspective and approach is to learn to maintain a centered position, an equilibrium state. I think what we should learn to do is maintain a centered position as long as we desire, or at least learn to return to a centered position whenever we're nudged in either direction, positive or negative, by life's happenings and events. And if we do this, if we're able to do this, I think we'll no longer fear the negative, because we know we won't be there very long. And we'll no longer seek out the positive unduly, irrationally so, because we know we can't stay there long. Being happy is great, but you can't stay there forever, once again, any more than you can maintain a full stomach. And being sad is fine as well, because you can't stay there forever unless you maintain it like you would maintain a full stomach. So with this understanding, with this perspective and this awareness, there's nothing to avoid on either side. There's only an experience of either side. Now, meditation, psychedelics, breath work, expanding your perspective through information and through experiences, through philosophy, through introspection, through physical exertion, strengthening yourself and challenging yourself and your notions of yourself and the world and the ideas that you hold will help, I believe, strengthen us in this fashion so that we can stop trying to contort, conform, and morph and mutate the world into something that doesn't upset us, that doesn't scare us, that doesn't bother us, and to learn to accept the world as it is in its full dynamic range and not necessarily be thrown off or upset or bothered by it. To accept reality on reality's terms instead of trying to change reality into some pleasant fantasy that never causes us to be fearful or unsettled. That's what I have to say. Let me know what you have to say in the comment section below, if you don't mind. Like and subscribe if you desire to, and I will see you on the next one. So you have a great day. Take care. Later.